style mic, not the fancy new ones. Good evening, 7:32 now. On Wednesday, we're going to do the pledge and start the meeting. And do we have Deputy Mayor remotely on here? Oh, okay, great. I just can't see. Great. Pledge allegiance, flag, United States of America, the Republic, stands one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Hey.
Trustee
Present.
Trustee Fritchie.
Present.
Trustee Quezada.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Lopez.
Present.
And Mayor Levin.
Present. All right.
Are there any public comments on the two agenda items that are on for this special meeting? Neither seeing nor hearing. Go into the resolutions. Resolution A. Resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign a retainer agreement with Whiteman, Osterman, and Hannah LLP, 1 Commerce Plaza, Albany, New York, to represent the village in certain dangerous building litigation matters, and be it further resolved that the terms of the retainer are detailed in Council's September 27, 2023 letter. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Comments? Folks, any comments?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign a retainer agreement with Hodges, Walsh, and Burke, LLP, 55 Church Street, Suite 211, White Plains, New York, represent the village in certain dangerous building litigation matters. May I have a motion, please?
So move.
Second. Any comments on this one?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have a motion to adjourn the work session, adjourn the special session and go into work session.
Second.
Do it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now in work session.
So just so everybody knows, we went from a special session as, just for the record, in case we went too fast and you blinked, and now we're going into our regular work session. Okay.
Any announcements from the board before I start?
Yes, I think we have.
Yes. Thank you. I just want to take a moment to actually thank a Lieutenant Richard Damiano. He's actually retiring from the police department. I want to say almost 29 years in the force. So I want to say thank you for all the work that you have done for this community. Thank you for everything that that he has done for the police department as well. So I'm really going to miss you, Richie. Thank you for everything. I think he's walked off is going to be on Friday 2:30. So anybody that wants to come to OPD to say thank you to Richie, he's more than welcome. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? So I'm just going to make actually a couple of things. I did my main message. I do one every week with the help of with a lot of help from Jamie Hoppin, our communications guru, and input from different folks in the community. This one was a little different because I wrote about the events that are going on in the state of Israel and the terrorism that has occurred, the kidnapping, the hostages, etc. The reason I'm bringing it up now is I've received a number of texts and emails, some to my personal account, some to my mayor, and there are three things that I learned from those emails. The first is that people were grateful that some information was sent and gave me their own opinions. I also happen to have family there, and so people asked how my family's doing, and that was very touching. It really speaks to the fact that we're all part of a community. But from a mayor's point of view, what was important for me is to realize that there are people in our community in Ossining that don't quite know what to do. So I was sharing a couple of links. You are free to email me at mayor@villageofossining.org. If you have family in Israel right now, somebody had written to me and asked me if this is just the folks who are Jewish who are there. That's actually not at all the case. If there are any Americans in Israel right now, whether they're there on business. I know that there is a local church group that happens to be there at this moment, and I got a note to ask how to make sure, because a couple of people are missing, how to make sure that they return. The State Department and our Congressman Lawler, both have information on how to fill out forms to get people back. The other question that I got from a few people is if you want to go to Israel to either do volunteer work or whatever, are the airports open? That's all on their website. El Al is running. I think we can go on with the rest of the meeting.
Good evening, everyone. First on our agenda, we have Dan Garbowit, who is the chair of the Historic Preservation Committee, and he is going to provide a presentation on some proposed changes to significant structures. It's a guide that the HPC has been working on, and with that, I'd love to turn it over to Dan.
Fine. Shall I speak from here?
Yes.
Should. You might want to raise the mic just a touch. There we
Okay.
go.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Back, I think in March when I was last here and reporting on what our ambitions were for this year, we mentioned updating historic structure guide. And we've made amendments to 3 projects. And hopefully, I think, Jamie, are they available now? In the order of importance, possibly in complexity, the first would be Brandreth, and then the National Bank for Savings down here in Five Corners, and then the Virium condominium project. Yes, that's it. Yeah, 411. I'd like to also mention, besides vetting with my board, we've also vetted it with the village council. So what's in yellow are the proposed changes graphically, as far as aligning text and photographs. That's yet to be done, but this is the substance of the changes. Just to recap, I think everyone here is, of course, aware that Brandreth was demolished. Yet in our guide, you wouldn't know that by reading it. You take a look at the pictures right now on the website, and anybody not familiar with Ossining would think the buildings are still there. So that's what we're addressing right now in this document. Self-explanatory. In 2015, factory and blacksmith shop were demolished. 2019, then the office building, and then description of, I can't necessarily, Jamie, read the stuff that's to the far right because of I think the dialogue box on the right. If that could be minimized. Sure. That part of it is a simple sentence, but down below it may make a difference. Description of the buildings plus history of the factory and the demolition narrative are contained below. So if you just scroll down slowly, Jamie, sure. A lot of it's grammatical because now we're using the past tense. So I'll go through that relatively quickly. Please stop when I ask you to, Jamie. So just keep scrolling down. So that's prior to demolition. So people know that it's no longer there. I added a demolition photo that we found on the internet. And then if you go down, that's what people would see as of today. And I think you see the blue trailer in the right, which purportedly would hold the salvaged elements that are described later in the text. Again, just consisted instead of currently. So if we continue to scroll down, all of that is really grammatical. I think we could continue until we get to the bottom where there's a paragraph that gets right here. Thank you. Demolition narrative. Yes, thank you. So this is a result of research we did. The factory and blacksmith shop were demolished between 2015 and 2016 by the developer that had acquired it in 2001. Demolition was controversial and contested by HPC because the property was locally landmarked in 13 in order to prevent further deterioration or demolition. Without HPC's review, the village DOB granted a demolition permit in 2008 after DOB, declared the vacant buildings unsafe. At that time, the village did not require DOB to submit the application to HPC for final approval. The regrettable loss of the buildings prompted changes to the permitting process that have enhanced coordination between HPC and DOB. And I think certainly there is cooperation between HPC and DOB today. In 2019, the developer applied for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish the office building. HPC rejected that application. The denial was overruled via developer's subsequent application to the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, ZBA's approval contained certain key stipulations championed by HPC, generally summarized below. So, construction of publicly accessible pavilion on the site dedicated to education about the industrial heritage of Ossining. The pavilion design will be subject to Board of Architectural Review. Also, the pavilion will be built utilizing these salvaged components of the office building, efficient portion of sloped entry canopy, roof brackets with decorative pendant, acorns, entry doors and frame, windowsill and lintels, suitable portion of brick for future display panel, and interior trim is feasible. Salvage components are to be stored on site in a weather and wind tight container, which I presume is that blue container I pointed out. Completion of the pavilion will be required before a certificate of occupancy for future buildings on site can be granted. The stipulations still apply should there be a change in ownership or any assignment of interest in the property. Then, of course, a reference to the exact wording in the resolution. And that's essentially the history of Brandreth. And we'd like to make those changes. I don't think there's anything more. If you'll scroll down, Jamie, everything else is pretty much the way it is now in the book. So we could go to the, I think the next one is the bank. That the one that comes up next for you, Jamie? Oh, okay. Just to give you the overview, I think we're all aware that this wonderful classical bank down here at the Five Corners has what I would call these black garlands above the upper windows, in contrast to the white stone and painted facades. Yeah, there it is. That's a historical photograph. As you can see, there are no contrasting black trim elements above the windows on the upper levels. Go down a little bit more. Thank you, Jamie. That's a photo we found. That's the only photo, and go further down, please, because we have a date. Yeah, this was 1907 after initial renovation. And so the top one was all white. And then the lower photo, which is the one you're looking at right now, sometime, if you could blow up the text a bit more, I'm sorry. Yeah. So when they went to renovate it in 2008, that's the condition of the building. And I'm not really sure what the brown garlands or trim pieces are above the heads of the window. I looked at meeting minutes from HPC at that time, and there's no mention of it, and there's no reference to it on the drawings that were submitted. But presumably, that was the precedent for, I presume, making them black and contrasting, because they already were that way. And the reason I'm pointing this out is, to the extent that what HPAC does in the past can be presumed to be a precedent for people going forward, we'd hate to have people think that you could just take a stone facade and paint something on the stone. So at least this is a way of showing people that even though it is black, as opposed to having been totally monochromatic before, there was a reason for it. And it's our way of saying, please don't look at this as a precedent for coming to us to just paint trim on a historic building. And I think that's it for the bank. You could go down further. I think there's nothing more. Yeah. And then the last one's the Virium. I think I pronounced that right. Yeah, Virium Schoolhouse down by the waterfront. And it was renovated into the condos in 1988. And if you go scroll down, please. Hopefully the photos come up. Yeah, there's an existing picture of it. I think we're all familiar. by the way, stop for a second if you wouldn't mind, Jamie. As you'll see on the forward corner picture, you'll see the just above the roof, you'll see a little picture of a metal flue. Those are flue stacks for I think chimneys. And then, excuse me, for fireplaces. If you just go down a bit more. And the reason this is here is that when you look at it, the historic picture that's already in the guide of that building, two elements are missing. Some really wonderful chimneys, brick chimneys, keep going down, and a wonderful Western dormer. So there's, again, the existing photographs. And now the black and white is what I believe you'll see right now in the structure guide. And again, to try to clarify to people and possibly give them a reason for the benefit of HPC is those chimneys, which I think you'd agree are a wonderful element, and the dormer are gone. And how did they disappear? And basically the answer is we don't know, because the building was renovated before we had HPC. I was able to get the drawings for that renovation, and surprisingly, there's no mention of demolishing the chimneys or that dormer. It's just silent on the issue. I don't know what happened, but so as a result, if you go to the yellow text now, please. So the massive brick chimneys in the Grand Central West dormer are visible in the historic black and white photo above. The 1988 renovation in the color photos show that the dormer and the chimneys had not been maintained. Renovation plans filed in 1986 do not reference these features, so presumably the chimneys and the dormer have been demolished sometime prior to the renovation. Brick window infill and metal kitchen bath vents, oh, they were bath vents, not fireplace vents, I forgot, on the roof were part of the renovation. All work took place before establishment of the Historic Preservation Commission. I think if that building were coming to HBC today, we'd have a very different outcome, at least for the dormer, possibly for the brick chimneys. And that wraps it up for these three projects.
Thank you. Great. So what year you were involved, Manny, in the creation of HP?
I was part when HPC became or I want to call it, because prior to that it was an advisory village board at that point. So in one of the process, I was part of the significant sites, and Valerie too, part of that process. Can't remember the architects. They're from Irvington. Steve Tilley, he was the architect who actually helped us to put together a lot of the stuff. And so I guess then I'm not sure if that.
No, just because I think there's a very strong point being made before it became what it is today. There's not a lot of memorializing the hows, the whys, the why nots. Oftentimes, I think when people who do construction add things, those are memorialized. But when they take things down, which they might think is unnecessary,
Yeah,
they don't really memorialize why and how, and there's no. So I was just curious. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah, no, some of the stuff, I'm gonna go back to some sort of memory. I mean, this is over 10 years ago, so I don't remember exactly how the conversations. I remember having conversations, and I think Dan and you and I had conversations about some of the stuff that happened. Obviously, I think in retrospect, some of the stuff that I think you bring it up is a good thing to do some updates to that, and we learn from those. I don't want to say mistakes, because they're not mistakes. I think we learn from valuable points that different people have different perspectives. Sure,
Yeah,
that's the perspective of that, and I think that's how we evolve, and we try to be better on different areas, no matter what the subject may be. So trying to protect some of the items that are still left, I think is a great thing. But my only question to you, and I guess for our end, is like, we don't need to hire any the consultants. We can do these updates internally, correct?
you're talking about the structure guide that we just talked
Correct.
about?
Mhm.
Because I'm not talking about the design guidelines.
No.
Right. No, I understand. Again, we were ready to just put it online from
Yeah.
my conversations
So,
with Jamie and Maddie.
Yeah, because this is just a small part of the architectural guidelines, because in the architectural guidelines, there are areas where it says do not do this. You do this. You know this. This is sort of the process, and like it's not just for that, it's just for the whole downtown area. It's like, how the storefront looks like, what is
Yeah.
what is good, what is not good, so that was a lot of time spent. So again, to the point of the mayor is, we did go through that, not in this particular buildings, but we went through as a guide itself that addresses all those issues. So, but we didn't put examples for those particular buildings not to do this. I think there are some examples in the guides where some of them may be there.
Oh, yeah, no, it
but
overlaps.
yeah.
Yes. It's again, it's not just for historic structures.
Correct.
The design guidelines are for,
It goes from signage, it goes
Any
from
old-
a lot of the stuff, storefronts,
Yeah.
banners, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
the other
so,
thing is they're called guidelines.
Yeah, they're guidelines. It's at that point, certainly
They're not
is an
code.
enforcement on the entity. So, but yes,
Yeah.
I'm again, if this, I'm okay with those minor updates to those 3 different properties that you brought up. So, that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Great.
I had 2 other things, 2 other points.
You're adding more to?
No, just
oh,
to raise something right now. If anybody present listening to this broadcast is aware of any other changes to the buildings in the historic guide, how they were 10 years ago versus now, we'd love to hear from you
Great.
and update those sections as well. One last thing, when we last met in March, I mentioned our board will also take a look at neighboring communities and how, whether or not they do HPC commissions, how do they do historic regulation? And I just brought hard copies. I don't think, Madam Mayor, you had a chance to maybe distribute them to the people who weren't issued them, but I have some hard copies of the March 13th memo if you'd like it, which indicates a comparison with 12 communities, including Williamsburg and Saratoga Springs.
Oh, I don't even remember reading this.
Oh, okay. Well,
So if you have.
be
you
happy
have
to give it to
copies
you.
For everybody?
well, I have 3 plus the cover
Right,
letter. I mean,
let's have those.
happy to give it to you.
I'll be interested in it. I'm not used to getting hard copies of anything. I'm like sitting here, wow, there's paper being given here. Okay.
And if the chart's hard to read, you can go in the email and you could blow it up on screen. That's it.
Does anybody else, first of all, thank you again,
You're welcome.
because I know it's a lot of work. A lot of these things that are just some text changes may or may not seem like a lot of work, but I always suspect it's more work than we realize. So appreciate it. Great to see, doing this. I have only a question, and others might have comments. So just want to ask the Corporation Council if this has any effect on any legal issues that we may or may not be involved in with any properties being mentioned. Okay, great. Have any questions or comments?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The bank, can we go back to the picture of the bank? The windows,
Yeah.
are those what'd you call them?
Well, I call them
Garlands?
garlands. If you don't just call them,
Are those stone or are they iron?
I thought they're probably some kind of metal iron.
Because I remember those being rusty. I don't think that's paint, I think that's rust. Yeah, yeah. Right. Now, today, I assume this happened before this had to go through the HPC approvals or something like that. But it was just okayed. So your preference would be that they were white? Mm. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. More questions? Deputy Mayor, any comments or questions?
Just expressing gratitude as well. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right, so I am getting a sense that you are getting a thumbs up for the changes as you prescribe them from the board.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Next on our agenda, Jim Wendling from Wilder Walter Partners is here to discuss some fairly I don't want to say, well, I guess minor, but changes made to the 30 Water Street plan adjustments as they're now going through the process, as well as request to the board to consider change in how we're doing the municipal parking floor at that building, which I know that I had briefed you on all on this via email, but we have the opportunity for Jim and his colleague Rich to be here. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim Wendling, who is here on Zoom.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you. Good evening. As Karen said, I'm joined by Rich Williams, who's a principal with Insight Engineering. It's great to be before you again. And just a bit of housekeeping. We should have an executed brownfield cleanup agreement with the DEC in the next couple of days. The public comment period came and went without any public comments. And we are at the 1 yard line finishing with Con Ed. So those are two big hurdles that will be, one has been cleared and will be cleared in the next, hopefully, couple days. As inevitably happens as you work through plans, because we've been full speed ahead with the plans and are looking to submit to the building inspector at the end of this year, and looking for early 2024 closing with HCR of the state. So as inevitably happens as you work through the plan, some minor changes come up, and I'll start. I want to go over a few of them. I want to go over all of them with you, and we'll pull up a plan in a second. But with respect to the parking, initially the plan was for the 45 municipal spaces to be on the 4th level of the parking garage. In that scenario, there would have been 45 public spaces on the 4th level, as well as a few residential spaces on that level too. So there would have been a slight mix. As we work through design with our construction team and the team of professionals that are working on this with us, we realized there's a way, it's a positive change, we think, but there's a way to move the 45 spaces to the ground floor. And that does a few things for us and for you. It keeps all of the municipal spaces on one level, so there will no longer be a mix of residential with municipal spaces, one. Two, we have an elevator for the for the garage, but there will no longer be a need to mix the residential component of the parking with the municipal parking on the elevator. It's an easier pathway to the community space that we'll have in the building. And we thought it was a positive change. It'll be one entrance dedicated solely to the municipal spaces. We've done this at another development in New Rochelle where we built back 200 municipal spaces and we have 130 residential spaces. The residential spaces will be controlled by an access gate or arm that will work with a transponder or a fob. That's what we typically do. So that's how the tenants of Station Plaza would access their parking, and the public parking would be open and there would be signage out in front. So that's kind of the first order of business. I'll pause there before we get into other changes and before I ask Jamie to pull up the plan so we can just walk you through, but I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions.
Just so, sorry, just so I'm clear, the total number of spaces we've discussed all along, how does that change and how does that affect any of the ADA issues, if at all?
No changes to the total 45 spaces and no changes to the whatever's required by local zoning and building code will be built. So no change to the ADA requirement as well.
Right, but for the residential, there's no change there either, correct?
Correct.
For the residents?
Yep, correct.
Okay. And now you're also going to include like a gated sort of entrance for the residential parts for the other 3 floors. Is that
Yeah,
right?
we were always, that was kind of something we were going to think through because we knew we still had previously on the 4th level, we had 45 municipal spaces, and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, we probably had 2 to 4 residential spaces just because we were, trying to fit all the parking into that 4th level. Now, again, with 45 public spaces on one level by itself, we will be able to much easily control the access and separate the public and the municipal parking.
Okay. All right, so he's pausing here for questions on this one item. Anybody have questions, comment? Anybody on Zoom? Anybody meaning Deputy Mayor? Okay, so I'm not hearing any questions and we might come back to it. So thank
Okay.
you for the clarification on that.
Okay, and if I can, let me just walk through some other changes that we'll also discuss with the planning board, but since we're here before you, I think it'd be a good opportunity to do that as well. So if you can pull up the plan, I will do my best to explain them and I'll ask Rich to jump in when
What?
necessary.
Hold on, what's the matter?
I'm sorry, I just saw it, so it's just downloading. It's taking a few minutes.
Oh,
I
okay.
I have it
Did you
available to
see-
share.
Okay, if you don't
Okay.
mind, thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Always prepared.
So everybody should now see the plan if the right monitor is being shared.
We're looking at a plan. It's
Yes.
gray and red. I'm assuming it's the right one.
Yes, this is the right one. So on the upper left page, you see the parking garage. The fourth level does not change. The fourth level is now, or the first level is now municipal parking, subject to you guys agreeing to that. You can see the entrance. Rich, go with your cursor to the entrance to the ground floor. So that will be the municipal entrance.
Mhm.
And then the entrance to the other three residential spaces have shifted very slightly as we've worked through the grading and the design of the building. One of the benefits of that is we picked up one space on Central Avenue. We previously had, Rich, how many?
Who?
We had
Okay.
two, now we have
Mhm.
three. So there's one additional space provided, or that will be provided when we're done. The one other change is the stairway. If you see number 4, was previously on the outside of the building at a choke point. We relocated the stairway to the inside of the building, which is just a better design. There's more space to land there. It was in a difficult space as previously designed, and as we went through the evolution of the plans, we were able to move it without affecting the parking count. So that's a net positive.
And
So,
Jim, sorry,
sorry
just
go ahead.
just to build on that too, this is also leading to a more direct access to the community space from the ground floor.
Thank you, Rich.
So if I'm not great at reading maps, by the way, so I'm sorry if I'm being too trivial here, but the way I'm looking at it now, correct me if I'm wrong, there are 2 entrances for cars. One is for the municipal lot, and the other one is on the other side on Central, which is for the residential lots, for the 3 levels residential lot. Is that correct?
No, is
So, Rich, you want to walk through the 4 different entrances?
Sure. So each level on the parking garage has its own entrance.
Oh, okay, that answers it. Okay, that was gonna be my fault. I
Yeah,
got that.
And Mayor, that is not a change from previously approved.
Okay.
They just have shifted slightly by inches and feet.
Okay, and just remind me, in this, there's no connection between each of the levels. I can't drive from the first level to the second, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. All
And
right,
that's part of the reasoning why by moving the public parking to the first floor, each of these entrances can now be gated if necessary without having an impact to the garage as a whole.
Got
And
it.
it also allows the residents sole access to the elevator, which helps
Got it.
maintenance.
Good, okay, and I guess it's because, okay, I got it, thank you.
Okay, I'll keep going. And again, just stop me if
Mhm.
you want me to stop in any particular area, or we can answer questions at the end. Number 5 is a play area that was added. That's an HCR requirement, a state requirement for affordable housing. We always knew we'd have to land it. Frankly, Rich and I should have landed it during the planning approval process. We just didn't, but that's a playground area. It'll be ADA compliant. You put the proper flooring down and you pick a play set. We do this on all of our affordable deals, as I said, because it's required.
And is that for residents only or for members of the community as well?
It's a good question.
Okay.
It's certainly for residents, and I don't see why, because we're bringing the community onto this site with the linear park and greenway extension. I don't see why there would be any reason why the public couldn't use
Right,
it.
so that's just a footnote to just double check, but this, yeah,
Yeah, there's easements we're gonna have to work through with your
Yeah.
council that, that's something that's probably could be just handled in the easement or easements that will inevitably have to work on, pivoting to pretty soon, actually.
Okay.
6 is the, bridge connecting Main Street to the building for our tenants only. And it's just shifted by feet because it's based on structural reasons and the landing into the building. It's the right space when we started laying out the apartments and the hallways and corridors and so forth and so on. So that's just a slight shift in the bridge. 7 is a potential generator location. We don't know if we will have the generator on the ground or on the roof, but we did want to flag that is a potential generator location. You need a backup generator. It's required. Frankly, I do think it's going to wind up on the roof of this building, but for now we're showing it here. 8 is, as we work through the parking, I should have started with this, or I should have added this to the first point. When we worked through the parking, we did actually lose 2 parking spaces in the parking structure. So 2 parking spaces were added. There were always a few kind of covered by a canopy in the building, but we added 2 spaces downscreen of that, right where Rich's cursor is now, because we have to be zoning compliant with the parking. So no net change to our total parking. And again, 45 municipal spaces in the garage, the balance of the residential spaces in the garage with a handful in that area. And then 9 is a slight change to the entrance, which is aesthetically going to be a better design. Rich, you want to walk through kind of the reason for that as we work through the grading and the changes there?
As we finalize the building elevations, we tweaked them a little based on the final floodplain analysis. And with that, as opposed to, ramps trying to get up into the commercial space for ADA access, we thought we could create a stair network that terraces with the grade. As the grade rises into the site, you lose stairs. It's a nice place to sit. It's a nice place to, gain access into the commercial space. It allows us to maintain a nice handicap accessible ramp in close proximity to the handicap spaces. And we can dovetail that with the plant bed, which we're still keeping here in some of the tree pits, to really kind of create that nice park-like setting, to draw you into the linear plaza. So we're actually really excited about this change. I think it's going to help make that space more usable by people and just feel a little bit more comfortable.
Okay.
So these were all changes that this started when I reached out to village manager to discuss the parking, and then we thought this would be a good opportunity to show you these other minor changes. We think they're all value add. We're going to show them to the planning board, but since you guys come before the planning board in the order of events, we thought this was a great opportunity. So we'll pause there and answer any questions you have.
Okay, I'm going to start from my right. Dana, anything?
Yeah, I've had several people say to me, express concern about flooding, especially after the recent storm. So when you say you adjusted the floodplain, what does that mean? I mean, is this, where does the garage and building sit vis-a-vis a floodplain?
So what we did was we did a site-specific floodplain analysis. We had a special consultant come in who analyzed the floodplain and modified FEMA's mapping based on the proposed development. And we set the building elevations and doors such that we're above the floodplain and meeting the floodplain code requirements. And then with respect to the garage elevation, because it's a parking garage, it doesn't have to be elevated above the floodplain, but it is designed such that the water wouldn't go into the garage, but would funnel down through Water Street.
And this was extensively studied during the approval process with your consultant as well. So we spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, heading this way, Mr. Fritchie.
Question, well, concern for me is that generator load.
I'm sorry, I don't know if others can hear you, but I can't hear you.
Just speak closer.
Here, here. Oh, you got it? There we go.
Hear me now?
No, it was on.
The other way.
I know, but it was. Doesn't matter.
Got a mic that works. Jim, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, start over. Generator location seems to be a concern for me, that it being on the ground. You know, I'm looking at the drawing. You have two rectangular boxes there. Is that designating the size of the generator, or is that just an approximate location? Concern is because of access to the back of the building.
Mhm. It's, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, it's an approximate location. It's certainly not sized, but again, frankly, I wish this comment wasn't even on here, but it is good to show you because, you know, the site is constrained, as everybody knows. But I ultimately think for a few different reasons, it's gonna end up on the roof.
Yeah, well, being constrained, that'd be even more reason for it to be up on a roof.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my other comment, I'm looking at the bridge. I know it's not highlighted in your comments here. I know when we met and we did the test with the fire truck and stuff, the east side of that bridge, I thought that was on more of an angle than straight, because if we have a problem, we've got to pull up. I don't know, things just look narrower than they were originally. So the proposed slight change to the footprint of the garage, is it moving east? I mean, is it moving north, the whole thing? Or is, because I see the blue outline, but it seems to be on the north side of your original line.
Yeah, we did not shift the shape, or we not reconfigure the shape of the bridge. Ridge, you want to talk through the shift of the garage? Walk us through that.
Sure. So, and Jim is correct. We did not modify this since the day we ran the test in the field. This has stayed locked. We've actually picked some of the grades up along the profile here, which actually gets you even a little higher than we anticipated the day we did the testing. But you can see this outline in blue here is the new parking garage footprint versus the old in black. We were holding the same line here.
Okay, and I see the relocation of steps, I would imagine creates a parking space there, but then when you put the steps towards the middle of the building, it kind of, you lose a space. So it's a wash, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, it was very helpful. I think that the only concern that I have right now, even though everything seems to be has been approved already and finalized with our consultants, that's something that Dana brought up is we've been having, as we all know, not 100-year rain process anymore every couple of years. Now is almost every weekend. So my concern is obviously the parking area where the ground floor, when you said is the water is going to run through it, I guess the capacity and all the Caltech systems and all the systems that you had put in place, that's been designed in accordance to all requirements and all FEMA. So not really a question, is more like a concern for me. We know that one of the buildings in the waterfront that was done a couple of years back, it always has some problems on their parking area as well. It floods it out. This is because it's closer to the river. Maybe this may not have that problem, but I guess we just have to wait and see.
Well, that's a good point, and we are, we're a fully integrated company, so we manage everything we own. So we are certainly sensitive to the increase in storms, both in duration, velocity, everything else we've been dealing with. One of the things that was studied here with your consultant and the planning board was adding concrete pillars in the Sing Sing Kill to the upper right of the page. which will help mitigate the storm surge, and then a shoaling pond as well to the right of that. That was added, or that was divided or created during the approval process. Rich is an engineer; he could speak to it more intelligently than I can. But certainly, we've spent a tremendous amount of time both with Insight Engineering and Rich and his team, as well as a consultant who works specifically with floodplain analysis, and Joe Tremelli. Rich, you want to just give 30 seconds on the debris deflectors?
Yeah, and just to add a little bit too, we didn't just do a floodplain analysis. Part of the original ADA also had a provision in there where we had to look at the Hudson River support tool and run a 36-inch sea level rise at a 100-year storm and see if the flooding came out of the banks, which was done in accordance with the LADA. The piers here were put in place based on some of the historic problems that we know what happens with the kill. So, there's floodplains, floodways, and different things flood differently. And what happens with the kill is it gets subjected to a first flush quite frequently. And what I mean by that is when a storm surges, a lot of debris is picked up during the steeper portions of the kill upstream of us and washed down. And right now, the only place for them to get hung up is right here at the Water Street culvert. So very often, that culvert becomes blocked at the early onset of a storm. And Paul and his team aren't able to get there until the storm subsides to clean it. But at that point, the dam starts building behind the kill and behind the training walls until it ultimately fails and comes down along Water Street. The idea with the piers are we have a deeper section of the kill in a valley where we can actually put concrete piers that go across the kill that'll still allow for the maneuverability of fish and other species that live in the kill, but at the same time can catch that large debris during the storm event and funnel it towards the shoaling area, but prevent it from washing all the way down to block the culvert. The hope with that is, in addition to the maintenance access, we're going to give the village that ultimately there'll be enough time to clean this out without having it impact the Water Street culvert. And that'll allow for the water to pass through more freely and hopefully less failure and flooding in this area.
Great, thank you. I just have a question, and this is just my own curiosity itself. So you have those parking spaces right next to the generators, more or less locations. Were those parking spaces always there when you first got the design that came in front of us?
The parking spaces that you see with the longer line to number 8, yes. The 2 spaces to the shorter line of number 8, no.
No, I just for some reason I don't remember those parking spaces being there. Look, is it relevant? I was just out of curiosity. I thought for some reason all the parking spaces were on the parking lot structure itself.
It's possible very early on in the process that was the case. I just don't remember the evolution of the plans, but certainly as we work through the plans with the planning board, those spaces shown were there except for the 2 that you see now.
Okay. So I'm assuming accessibility because those are ADA, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So accessibility to the building, they go through the rear of the building, or do they have to go around the building?
There's an accessible route within the building that they can utilize.
Okay.
There's also an accessible route along the exterior of the building that can be utilized both ways.
All right. Interesting. All right. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, any questions, comments, thoughts?
I'm in support of the changes broadly, but particularly the change of making the public parking on the first floor. To me, that all makes a lot of sense. And I don't have any additional comments on the other changes. Just feeling good, wanting this process, which is moving at the speed of smell, to really start to get some momentum going. But yeah, grateful for you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, this was super helpful. Thank you. I wrote in my email at some point that I was glad for the update. I think it's actually does sound positive. I think it makes a lot more sense than the original design. I hope that there is lots of sitting areas, which we saw in the first renditions, and trees planted and all that, because the area looks a little bare right now, and I hope this will improve it. But most importantly, I'm excited that we're moving forward, because I get worried. It's like it starts. It's not that it's your fault, but I'm so happy I feel like we're on to the next step. The baton has moved to the next runner.
And
So,
to that point, we're actually out there doing geotech analysis field work this week. Con Ed will be out there doing a little bit more work next week. So that's why you see some activity in and around the site if anybody's been down there. So yes, things are moving.
no, very exciting. Thank you very much for joining us. With that,
Mayor, may
oh,
I-
I'm sorry. Of course, of course.
Jim, it's Stewart. Just, I want to be clear. Everything in the ladder that refers to the 4th level unit will now be switched to the 1st level unit?
I assume that's right, Stuart. I would want to go back and just read the ladder, but yes,
Okay, in other words, in terms of providing electricity into the 4th, it will now be
Oh.
to the 1st?
yes,
And in
yes.
terms of maintenance and everything like that, I just
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah, and we have
Wait.
to, we'll have to memorialize that in the parking easement agreement, which we haven't
Right.
finished yet, or we haven't
we'll
started yet,
also,
but
we'll also have to amend the ladder.
we'll have to amend the ladder. Yes, I should have pointed that out. I like to avoid the legal issues and go right to the plans and stuff like that, but yes, you are right.
And if you don't mind, while I have you, I'm just curious if you're putting EV stations in there.
We are putting EV,
Where?
We're both.
Like on which floor?
Well, certainly on the ground floor for the municipal spaces, and what floor they will land on in the residential, I don't know. We're doing more than is required by state. Because,
Understood.
yeah, I just don't have the exact number, but there will be municipal EV and residential EV.
Right. So again, this is not really a legal issue. It's not on behalf of anyone. It's more out of curiosity because I drive all electric. I actually lived through like a flooding out west, and it was a brand spanking new building with 50% of the parking lots having EV stations because there's so many electric cars out in California. When it rained, all of not only did the cars have problems because there was so much water gathered, but the electrical to the EV boxes were totally damaged. Something they didn't predict, interestingly enough. I'm just personally curious how that works with EV on the first floor with water, etc. It's really more a learning for me. It's not a demand that you do more than you need to and all that. I'm just personally curious, as we'd like to put more EV stations, and why not use this as sort of just learning?
Well, when we
Focus.
have it spec'd, we're out to probably 2 or 3 different potential vendors. When we have it spec'd, I'm glad you flagged that as an issue. We will work through that with them, and wherever we land, we will come back and discuss that with you. I'm sure there's been a evolution of EV chargers and EV stations over the past couple of years to deal with that. Yeah, I don't know right now. I don't want to give you an answer, and I just don't know.
And I'm not demanding that you do X, Y, or Z.
Right,
I'm
right.
just curious as we move forward with having more of them down by the river near Kills, where there's flood zones. This is just an interest of, and you're right, every year the technology changes all the way around. So usually for the better. So I really appreciate the education. So thank you.
Great.
Is there anything else from staff? Is there anybody? Since Paul is here, Valerie, anything since you're both here? While we have the gentleman on the call of questions, I mean,
I'll be following up with him tomorrow to talk a little bit more about the process in front of the planning board and just to confirm what changes are being made and then how to get that into the approval process.
fantastic.
Right.
Thank you. Paul, anything from you?
Just building on what Jim started to introduce about the stormwater on the east of the parcel that we're inevitably going to end up taking back when it gets re-subdivided and given back to us as parkland. That area, which is still, part of the submittal, necessary to be, those details is still going to be submitted, and we'll share it with you at that time. But the aforementioned bollards and anything they're going to do to the contours and topography back there are all going to be for the stormwater surge and to protect the debris from blocking up the culvert on Water Street right now. And the easement that is primarily done to be a public access easement to the linear park is also going to be an easement, so we can go and perform the necessary maintenance on what is going to, again, become our property and our parcel, so we can get back there and take care of a lot of the debris that does rush down during the storm, and hopefully ameliorate the issues that we have at that culvert often. I mean, I think Rich can attest, I've sent him probably 2 or 3 videos since Wilder Boulder started becoming interested in this project of flooding at that culvert, where it does top it due to the debris that makes its way down during that first surge during heavy rains. So that'll all come down when the details of the path come to us, and I'm sure we'll share it at that time.
I'm hearing storm gardens all over the place here in this conversation. Yay, thank you. All right, thank you, folks. Very much appreciate it.
Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Next, we're going to bring Valerie up here again to discuss a zoning change memo from the planning board, recommendations based on the zoning changes proposed for 325 North Highland Avenue. So with that, I would like to introduce our planning consultant, Valerie Nostra.
I think,
Hello, Valerie.
I believe the applicant's attorney are they on as well?
Is Jack?
Yeah, Jack.
Yes, just for the record, Jacqueline Cohen, associate law firm Mazarin and Steinmetz, representing the applicant 325 North Island LLC.
So as the board knows, the applicant is petitioning for to add an additional use into the OR district, which is basically they're looking to allow for veterinarian uses within the OR district.
You have to. It's a public
I'm
meeting.
sorry, Office Research District.
Thank you.
And this is located along North Highland Avenue. The petition, the village board referred the petition over to the planning board. The planning board looked at the petition, and they were in support of the proposed zoning change. So at this point, a recommendation was provided to the board. They felt that the zoning change was appropriate, especially since there are similar uses such as medical and hospitals, which are, clearly they don't deal with animals, but they deal with people. And so they felt that there would not be any additional impact with the change of use. So this now is back at this board. And if the board wants to continue moving forward with this process, then it would ultimately need to go for a public hearing.
Okay, I'm going to start to my left. Questions or comments on this one?
No questions. I'm in favor of that change.
I'm in favor as well.
Deputy Mayor, questions, comments, thoughts?
No questions. Only comment is I'm in favor. No additional thoughts.
Great. I think we can move forward on this one.
All right, thank you.
Look at you. You don't know what to do. You're like, what? I get to sit down after 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome to stay, but I'm pretty sure that you may not be so interested to stay for the rest of our meeting. But thank you for joining us on behalf of your client.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
All right. And moving right along, last but certainly not least, we have our Director of Public Works and Village Engineer, Paul Fraioli, to talk about traffic calming measures, what's been done and what's being planned.
Hello, sir.
Good evening again, Mayor and Board. Thank you, Karen. So originally talking about coming on the agenda, it was to talk a little bit about the if the board was interested in studying implementation of speed humps in the village, but after discussing it with the manager, we thought it might be a good opportunity while I was here to talk about some of the other projects that are going on in the village out of Public Works, specifically in the road. Not all the projects presented here, but some of the road work projects, because some of them do have pedestrian and traffic calming measures implemented into them. So if I may, for a couple minutes, just introduce some of those, and then we could get into a little bit of the speed hump discussion. Two of the main road projects that are going on right now that are primarily streetscape is on James Street. That was a CDBG project that was funded 50% matched by CDBG, which is a program administered by Westchester County. We received $200,000 for that. We matched it with $200,000. So we're expending a little over $400,000 on that project. It's the sidewalk streetscape on James Street. And then after we're all done there, we're going to use CHIPS money to pave that area. Another area that's going to get paved in the next couple of weeks is on Hunter Street. Con Edison's been down there for the last year, putting in a new gas service for all the residents down there, main and service. So we're going to take advantage of that and have them mill and pave Hunter Street, which is part of their permit. And we're also going to take care of a little section of Lower James, which they're going to do while they're down there. We'll get a little economy of scale from the contractor there, and that whole corridor will be newly paved and nice thoroughfare for those residents and the folks that traverse Hunter Street on a daily basis. The five-way intersection project kind of came to a little bit of a standstill because I think, as I mentioned the last time I was in front of the board, all of the above surface installation of the signal work and the pedestrian crossing and all the ADA accessibility and the pedestrian signals are all very, very long lead items. They suffered some significant delays due to production, and we're still looking to bring them in by the end of the year, but we really have a hard time getting a firm date. So yeah, maybe.
Not you.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Yeah, well, whatever that bet
No,
is.
I get it. I do want to just stop you though, because you said that very quickly. People are asking about that light post that comes right where the crossway is. And I do tell people that's going to get changed. The last part of this, people don't realize that those lights are old. They think they've already been done. So I just want to put in the record that we're almost done with this project, that it's just a delay in parts, etc. But it's going to get done.
Good point. All the equipment that you see there now, all the signal and pedestrian crossing work that you see there now is existing equipment, but it is antiquated, and that's all getting replaced with state-of-the-art equipment. If you happen to see the damage there on the bollard detail in the corner of Central, we worked with the police. We did pick up the driver on video, and they've been summoned, and they're going to appear in court, and we're going to work with counsel and the police to recover the cost of that restoration work, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. But I will tell you that part of the new instrumentation on the signal will be a intersection camera, which is going to be able to tape and monitor that activity in the future. So that'll
be great.
That's
a shame that that curb is pretty high. I'm surprised there was no damage to his vehicle.
It was a trailer, yeah,
Okay.
tractor trailer, and it is what it is. We work around it. First time it happened, it might not be the last.
Annie, did you have a question about that, or was that you that mentioned that didn't we have laws about weight and size in that area? I think that's more of a Stewart question. I don't remember what the answer was. There isn't.
But there's no longer a weight limit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the 5-ton weight limit that you might be. Yeah, the 5-ton weight limit is specific to Broadway. The work we did on the bridge and the intersection down there isn't really conducive to bringing that type of transportation down there. But we did also at the same time we removed the 5-ton weight restriction on Snowden to try to encourage trucks that like to go down to the waterfront to use the Snowden corridor, because there really shouldn't be a restriction there to access the waterfront, because the two Metro North bridges can handle that weight, specifically the Snowden Bridge, which most of them use to get to the other side of the water.
Just trying to figure out how to prevent this from happening again, but that's a different conversation. I'm sorry, I interrupted your
That's all right.
your presentation.
All good conversation. So the third item that we're doing on the road that is really a big improvement, we haven't started yet, or it's in the design phases now, is we picked out 3 intersections which have been a long-standing issues for pedestrians. We're looking to make those a lot safer, which is the intersection at Betts Park and Narragansett. We're gonna add pedestrian access from the existing sidewalk into the park, and even put an extended sidewalk so people who do actually walk to the park and versus just driving there can walk there and cross Narragansett safely. Linden and Croton is another, particularly when school gets out, is another big area for people that walk down Linden Avenue, Upper Linden, and cross down to Lower Linden. Croton Avenue really doesn't have formal crosswalks there, so people are basically jaywalking, and we don't want that. So we're going to implement a four-way crossing there. No stop signs, really not recommended by the traffic engineer, and that section of the state road probably would be tough to get through them. But we are going to put designated crosswalks there, which would be a requirement to stop if someone's in the crosswalk. And I think it would be pretty effective the way we're going to sign it and mark it, and also put the ADA ramps there. And then the third intersection is just up the street from Village Hall at Elizabeth. As you know, if you make that right turn out of Village Hall, you see where those stairs at Elizabeth are, which kind of like a Rube Goldberg ADA ramp that we have in there now. We're really going to do that more specific with a specific design, and we're going to add the crosswalk, which again many people use to cross the street at that intersection there. We're going to put a designated crosswalk there. And I will say that when we first thought of this, we would have lost a couple of parking spaces on the downhill side, if you will, for the appropriate signage and clearance from the crosswalk. But those were now removed anyway as part of our improvement for that area. And we're probably not going to lose one across the street because it's already hashed out for a drop curb for access to one of those buildings. If we're probably going to lose a tree because there's a tree where we want to land the ADA ramp, but we'll make up for that somewhere. And I think that's a much needed improvement there too, a crosswalk there. And that's really what we're putting these in areas that we know people cross, and we're trying to really designate it and make it a little more formal, similar to what we did the Children's Center. Once that building went there, we added a formal crosswalk there with signage, and we also added one as part of the five-way intersection. A little offshoot of that project was we went up to Maple and we actually did some. We eliminated one of the parking spaces and dropped a formal crosswalk there with signage and ADA accessibility on both sides, because we do know a lot of people come down Maple and they cross right into the post office, particularly people from Maple House. They do that often to get into that parking lot and or the post office or the drugstore or wherever they're going. And so that's a good thing to have there. Fourth thing I want to talk about was 2 road work grants that we're working on with the manager's office. We have 150,000 and 850,000, so $1 million coming in to us through grants from the state for Westerly Road, and the 850,000 is the Route 9 road diet. Very cumbersome, administratively laden grants, but we're plodding through it. And
what's the matter?
Did I say that backwards? Thank you. Okay, that's even better. Enhanced. 850 was for the intersection, my mistake, and the 4 million for the road diet. So it's worth the administrative burden that we're going to go through, because the road diet is a significant project, and it would be nice if the majority of that gets offset through the grant. Some of the signage projects we've been working on in concert with the police department to help with enforcement. We've been putting up no parking here to corner signs to give the appropriate clearance from stop signs and intersections to kind of reinforce which is already an existing V&T. The some of the signs when we were hanging them as per code for parking and no parking through some of these neighborhoods are new. Signs are new, but the code is not new. And we even got enlightened a little bit where we didn't realize there was no parking, but as we plotted through the neighborhoods with the code, we realized that there was no parking in certain sections. I think the most egregious area there was in Indian Village, where there's basically a couple of streets that were no parking in the code, but there was no signage there. So we put the signage up, and it, there was some sticker shock, I guess, but you know, the residents are adjusting, and we're working through the issues as they come to us, and have some good conversations and, learning a little bit about where we can make things a little bit better. The other thing we've been doing is anywhere there's intersections where it really warrants it, we've been adding stop signs, because in a lot of areas when they were originally subdivided back in the, whether it be the 30s or the 40s or even the 50s, there was no real need for a stop sign and no stop signs dedicated in those site plans. But although you don't necessarily need to put them in for, traffic control, it's something that we think with some of the neighborhoods what they've grown into and some of the traffic that exists in those neighborhoods now, it's money well spent. And that's been a lot of kudos of coming to the office for that, because that really does help, calm and control some of the traffic, particularly in some of the cut through neighborhoods. So that's what we're trying to be really attentive to there, where we're adding some safety to some of those cut through intersections, and that's being pretty well received. I'm happy we're doing that. Just as far as counts are concerned, we're in excess of 24 additional stop signs. Those were adopted, I think, at the last minute meeting. Corporation Council read those to you. We had a little, blip. There was the fellow responsible for that was out of the office for a little bit, but we're getting back at that with the no parking here to corner and the stop signs. And then when we're finished up, probably in the next couple of weeks, Corporation Council will receive a list if we do add any stop signs, and we'll know about it at that time and adopt them at that time. But that's, something, again, we're doing in concert with, where we're coming with areas of concern, we alert them to it, and then they go and do the enforcement based on the new signage. So, in discussions with Karen, I guess there's been some, collateral conversations about other
Hold on
methods.
1 second. What's
So
up?
before we move to that topic,
Eh.
in regards to the stop signs and what you've been doing, the improvements throughout the village, you were to break it into different sections or village. Are you 3/4, halfway there? What is more or less percentage?
Well, I think if you break it into like a
Or a bigger pie,
geographical percentage, I say we're a little over half.
Okay.
But I think as far as the areas where stop signs are likely to be added, we're probably 3/4, because it was more the single family residential areas that are now where we have stop signs placed in, like Indian Village and all around like Arthur Jones Park around there. But as you get down into the village proper, most of those areas are already signed with stop signs.
But more or less, you like, I want to say, don't have to be a Highland Avenue down. You haven't
West,
done
we
any-
haven't really touched
Okay,
yet. Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. West of Route 9, we haven't really gotten into yet.
Thank you.
We'll get there.
You going on to the humps?
Yeah.
Before you get there, this stop. I just want to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
And questions, more comments. First of all, thank you. Signage has been sort of on the plate, on and off for quite a while, greater than a couple of years. So, I think it's nice. I'm really happy about this. I wrote a couple of weeks, it'll be done, but I'd like to be able to at least say that it will be 100% done, the signage, by the end of 2023, couple of months. So that's a fair statement.
Definitely.
Okay, so that's great. And you started, I think, sort of at the border with the village and town and worked your way down like neighborhood by neighborhood. Everybody always thinks of downtown, but as you said, that's actually not where any of the issues are. It's actually in the many residential areas. But I think like going through all the codes that have been around since 1984, 1985 and updating, probably we should have done this, every 10 years we should do this, or every 5 years. So I really appreciate the project going forward. I think it's been really well done. As you know, and we've all experienced, things that are new and unusual and sort of show up for people, that change is always like difficult for people. But I think for the most part, especially the no parking from the corner pieces were important, because we have problems with trucks getting through and snow plowing and all that. So I think delineating that, but mostly these are public streets. And people do have a right to come in, like to this very courtroom, and say, how am I supposed to know there's no parking at certain times? Because there's no signs anywhere, and I don't live around here, and they're public streets. They're not just for the people living in neighborhoods. They're public streets, meaning literally for the public. Not going into condos and in those areas on their private spaces. They're public streets. I think this has been great, and it's been long in the works. You're following codes. I appreciate that. Stop signs, as you know, every time the school year starts, you get requests for stop signs and crosswalks. So the fact that you guys are doing this, delineating all this, personally, very grateful. Thank you for the update on the grants. I think, really good stuff. The crosswalks, a lot of them, over the years, with all the tires going over them, they sort of become hard to see. So I think the fact that you're working on the crosswalks is really great, but more importantly, it's really important. We have been pushing to become a more walkable community for like a decade. Every year we do more. And so if you want more people to walk, and more people are walking, that is a great thing. So you got to put crosswalks, you got to put stop signs, it all goes hand in glove. So I think this is all happening exactly the way it should be. And really appreciate the work being done. And I've been driving around. I think it's great. You didn't mention this, but some signs have fallen off. Some signs are not readable anymore, putting those up. So I really appreciate all the work. So really not so much questions, except I wanted to make sure that I can honestly say, I don't like winning $5 bets. Don't want to win another one, but as long as you're done by the end of 2023, honestly, I think fantastic, really great. So really appreciate it. I don't know if you have comments or if the mayor has any more comments about this, and then we'll move on to topics actually on the. You're good, Deputy Mayor, looking at you. Okay, thumbs up on that. So thank you for the update, and now we can talk about the humps.
So before I do that, ultimately, I guess speed humps are introduced into the conversation, basically for the reason of speed control. So a couple of the things that we've been working on for speed control, because it's not the only way to calm traffic and slow cars down, are non-stop sign measures, I'll call it. Because if you go to manual of uniform traffic control, which is everybody's Bible on how to sign your roads, it says right in there that you should not use stop signs for speed control. However, it defers to the local authority. If you think that a stop sign warrants it in a non-four-way intersection, you certainly have the ability to do that based on your local experience. And that's what we kind of enacted on the two that we added on Sherwood, because those were known cut-throughs. So we put those there. And then we put them at all the other tributary roads where they come into the main arteries, which, is endorsed by them. So that's a good thing for speed control. Some of the other things we've done for speed control are some of our pavement markings. You could see, I'll use Underhill Avenue, for example, that's recently paved in the last few years. In addition to the double yellow, we also put a fog line along the edge of the road. A lot of people, refer to it as a bike lane or a pedestrian.
The fog lines or the white lines are to your right when you're driving.
Right.
The yellows are always in the center to your left.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
right.
those are the lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, the fog line or the white line to the right of your travel, basically what it does is it gives a visual restriction to the lane width, and by default, your mind says to slow down to stay in that lane, versus if you had a wide open area of blacktop, you might not want to slow down. So we're trying to do that in appropriate areas. We put increased signage if you're coming up on a curve in some areas. And one of the big things we've done is put up the yellow recommended speed reduction signs, where you'll see where appropriate. We have, 30-mile-an-hour speed everywhere in the village, but if we're coming up to turns, we put a lot of the yellow signs that indicate that there's a turn coming up. You might want to slow down, and maybe we'll put a recommended speed of 15 miles an hour in a lot of those areas. That's what the sign means. I can't say that everybody takes it to heart, but that's what it's there for. And then one of the more visible things we've done is put up a couple of those digital speed signs, radar signs, which indicate your actual speed. And we coupled that with the posted speed in that area to make people aware if they are exceeding that posted speed. The ones that have, I think, really helped us is on Van Cortlandt, where it's 15 miles an hour going up the hill. Received a lot of calls from parents and school district employees about the speed of other parents and people when they go up to the
When they were in a rush.
yeah, and, and we get it. It happens. But in that area, they really needed to slow down, and I think that sign is going a long way to that end. So much so that we were contacted by the police department about a week ago that folks are interested in exploring doing them on Route 9. But that's a state road, as you guys know. So I just petitioned the regional office, and they said they would be on board with that, but please go through the permit process so we can authorize the same. So I'll go through that permit process, and if something comes to fruition out of that, process with the local office out of Katona, where the permit officer is for the DOT, I'll get back with the police department, and you might see some of those radar signs on Route 9 in areas of excessive speed. So that's some of the things we do for speed control now, on top of the old-fashioned police enforcement.
If you don't mind, I know that's the engineering term, but I just am interested in words. Not actually speed control, it's actually safety control. The whole idea is that you drive at a certain speed, it becomes unsafe. And when you're going places where there are schools, that's a big deal. So, you know me, I'm just interested in words because I wanted to be understood that we're not trying to control people's speed. We're actually trying to make sure there's a safety element involved, which is why the parents are so grateful for all of this.
So, again, with all those things aside, coupled with radar enforcement, there's the discussion of speed humps. A lot of communities have adopted them. So to really educate myself, because it's not something that I really ever got behind, and when in discussing that this was going to be an agenda item with the manager last week, I kind of did a quick study, and I pulled out the Federal Highway Manual on the specifics of speed humps, and I'm not going to put everybody to sleep and read the details behind that, but it is thorough. It's not a new concept, but I found another document. It was actually pointed out to me, and I printed out the draft version of what I think is adopted now. City of Yonkers actually has a policy for speed hump implementation in their city. So before we get into discussions of a policy, I just want to discuss a couple overview. The first thing is words, names, as you were referring to. A speed hump is used for speed control in public roadways, typically 2-lane roads, 1 lane in each direction, low volume traffic areas, never on thoroughfares, never where there's truck traffic, never emergency vehicle issue. You don't want to create that speed hump in an area like that. A speed bump is something that's typically used in private parcels, parking lots, or public parking lots to restrict speed within the parking lot. We used to have a couple of them right in Village Hall to slow people down when they whip around the corner there. I went to the other side. So what Yonkers does is because of let me talk about the advantages and the disadvantages first. The advantages are just that: speed control or safety control, if that's what you want to call it. It does reduce cut-through traffic. People will avoid them if they're going to be going over every day. You try to avoid it. You do cut-throughs, but there are some disadvantages too, and I want to read the ones that are highlighted in their policy, just as they pointed out. There is vehicle noise associated with speed humps. Between people slowing down, there's the car noise of acceleration, deacceleration. And then there's the noise of the vehicle itself, depending on the condition of that car. There's potential damage. Some cars, even though they're designed to be a subtle 4-inch hump, there's potential damage to the car itself if you have a low profile car. There's the aesthetic of the speed hump in the road. It's not just the hump itself, but there's significant markings on the street that need to be maintained and called out for that speed hump. And then there's the sign it's a yellow diamond sign that says speed hump at the location of the sign. And then there's another one in advance of the speed hump that you have to also place. And based on the neighborhood that they're appropriately installed in, it's not really an aesthetic that people want in front of their house typically. You know, they go as far to say if you hit the speed bump maybe at a excessive speed or even the speed limit, there could be some medical condition that gets caused by hitting that speed bump. It does slow emergency response vehicles. The other studies that this references in their policy is that because they're typically not placed closer than 300 feet apart, they have to be separated a certain distance apart per the manual. Sometimes you get to the speed hump, and a lot of times you drive faster to the next speed hump to make up for the lost time wherever you're going. And sometimes you might end up driving faster than you would have if there was no speed hump there. There's drainage issues that you have to concern yourself with. The water still needs to run down the curb in many of the areas. And sometimes to circumvent the speed hump, they go around it, causing car to go out of the lane of traffic and avoid the speed hump. And it also might have an effect on neighboring street, where if you're going to avoid a speed hump, you're basically just taking all those cars and you're kicking them over to the next street down. And, you know, so to what end do you put speed humps in? If you're going to have them here and they avoid that, do you put it on the next street that they go to? And then there's topographical considerations, because the highway manual also makes reference to, you know, you really shouldn't have them on a non-straightaway. You shouldn't have them on a road with greater than a 6-degree incline or decline, and you shouldn't have them anywhere near curves. And if you drive around the village, that's, you know, that's a pretty hard road to find, unless you find a road with high volume traffic, which is a lot of cut throughs. Then that high volume is also something that they discourage, because you don't want to put speed humps on a high volume traffic. And you definitely don't want to put them on an area where you have trucks or emergency vehicles. So all those things being considered, coupled with, you know, the maintenance of the speed hump itself. I can't really attest to the condition of speed humps during snow operations when the plows hit them. You know, there's other things that kind of in addition to what this that kind of really discouraged me from exploring it any further than I did. However, I will tell you that if it was something that the board was interested in pursuing, I would probably do a little deeper dive into presenting something along of a policy, because what Yonkers calls out is they put the onus on the residents of the street that are calling for the speed humps to submit I believe it's a 70 or 75% concurrence with the installation of speed humps to be studied. They won't even consider it on a road until a significant or a predetermined percentage of people that actually own the properties on those streets concur. Yes, I'm okay with the city putting speed humps on this street. Once they get that, if they get that, then they will start the process of doing speed studies. And at which point, I think it's, I don't know the exact percentage, but a certain percentage of vehicles on that road need to be studied to be needs to be documented to be exceeding the posted speed limit. So, you know, this is something else that, you know, I've discussed with the police department. There's speeding, and then there's perceived speeding. And, you know, when you're on a road, you have a village posted speed limit of 30 miles an hour. And if you're on a road or you're sitting there at the bus stop and there's, you know, this, again, we're all sympathetic to what's going on here. But if you're at a bus stop and you're, you know, with your children are trying to cross the road and a car passes you at 30 miles an hour, which is the posted speed limit, that could seem pretty quick if you're in an area where there's a lot of cars and the road's small. It's still 30 miles an hour, and technically it's not speeding. But, you know, there's other alternatives to slow you down. And I'm not so certain that speed humps is going to be the be all end all answer for this.
That,
Yeah.
okay. So, I think you're doing this analysis because the board asked for it. So let me start from the left, if anybody has questions or comments to this.
Well, I know we've known each other for a long time. And you and I had conversations about this. And it seems like it was more of more negative issues that you found than positive issues in regards to this. So if not this, then how do we do the safety portion that we've been talking about from the beginning, sure, besides signs? Because as we know, as you suggested, and I seen this, places where you have posted the signs with the radar, with the suggested speed, 15 miles an hour. I spent about 2 hours, an hour and a half on a couple of the places, 45 minutes here and there. And I can tell you, I don't have a radar, but I was looking at the radar. Nobody was doing 15 miles an hour, in 45 minutes. So if not humps, what else can we do to slow people down on local streets? And it doesn't matter where they are, sure. What can we do in regards to this? And I'm not going to say the recollection that that I had when I first brought this back a couple of years back, but it was very similar to what you just said now. Maintenance, safety portions in regards to the plowing, emergency vehicles. It was pretty much very similar to that presentation at that time. So if not this, then what can we do? What else can we do to protect our workability? Because that becomes, as something that it was brought up several times, not just now. It's like we're trying to promote people to walk on our streets. So if we don't have a safety portion, we don't have a safety mechanism for people to safely close the streets, what else can we do?
Well, I think we, every time we touch a road, we try to implement the best practices for pedestrian safety. Signage, recommended reduced speeds if it's appropriate for that area. Road markings to call out crosswalks, and advanced warning signage when you're approaching crosswalks. Some stop signs added. And, at that point, it becomes, if you want to make a blanket enforceable slowdown, you might consider what some communities have done, which is a speed reduction ordinance to 25 miles an hour. But that's something that
that we can't do that right now.
we can't just do it without.
No, we have to do this whole study with the state.
Right.
We have to hire an engineer. It goes through this whole process if that's what we want.
Right. The state does have to endorse it, and they do that after a study, but there is a mechanism to do it. And at that point, it's outside of measures that we can do with signage and appropriate marks on the road, there's enforcement.
I'm done.
So first of all, I'd like you to extend my appreciation to your crews for the job they're doing with the signage and whatever else you're doing out there. Second of all, I think we have two prime candidate test spots, and maybe to take advantage of Con Ed repaving Hunter Street, of putting some humps on Hunter Street, and the west parking lot of the train station is a drag strip. And it's pretty flat. The west side. West of-
Over, you're in front by the restaurant.
Yeah, down towards the prison. Actually,
Got it.
the whole,
You weren't asking.
no, I
He's
never
talking
did
from
that.
experience.
I just think they're two prime candidates to try this out. I get the pros and cons, but I think we really need to do something somewhere. At least try it. That's my opinion. Other than that, you guys are doing a great job.
Those are your suggestions for to test two
Yes.
trials. Okay. Paul, you didn't mention costs. Did you look into the cost of doing a hump?
No,
Okay.
I did not.
Okay, but I'm sure you could figure. I just thought maybe I missed it. Thank you. Dana, comments, questions? Are you done?
I'm not against trying it somewhere if it makes sense. And, I don't know if you would have to get 75% of the people on Hunter Street to agree, people who own property to agree to having a speed hump.
But we don't have a policy. I was just
don't have a
I was
policy.
throwing it
Just
out there. 'cause
saying
other
that
people-
somebody else does it. Yonkers, I think,
Yeah.
right?
I was looking for, I mean, I
Oh, okay.
threw together
Alright.
this discussion a little hastily, admittedly, but I was just looking for a jumping off point to start the
Right.
conversation.
This board would need to adopt legislation to put us to do this. You do have the right to put in devices. Nothing in the code with regard.
Okay,
Specifically have to adopt that.
okay.
I should also point out, Spring Grove in Orange County actually has a local law that explicitly prohibits speed humps
Okay.
for the exact reasons that Paul pointed out.
They prohibit.
Prohibit.
Interesting. Like, okay.
Is there any temporary measure that kind of equals what a speed hump might do, but that is not something you'd put in permanently, some sort of? I don't know.
Well, I will say that I'm not certain of the referenced Westerly Road designation. I'm not sure if that's a designated road versus a parking lot. So we may have some flexibility there. It's something I could explore. But as far as Hunter Street's concerned, that is certainly a public road right of way. That Con Ed is not going to reinstall it with a speed hump in it. They're doing that work next week. But regardless, speed humps are something that are typically installed after. Anyway.
I mean, I be completely self-serving, you know. The street I live on is a long street and there's a steep incline at the top and people really get up their speed and then they come whipping down and there's an intersection and where people have to stop, but there are accidents there on a regular basis. And horns and tires squealing and the occasional collision. And I think it's because people just get so much speed coming down that incline. You know where I live. So
On the lower part of Ellis.
upper part
Upper
coming
part.
down off of Linden.
Okay.
And then it flattens out, but by that time you're going pretty fast. And then you got a stop sign off Churchill and people coming and making a turn. And it's just not a good scene. Now, I'm not saying a speed hump would help, but I don't know if there's anything we could do to get people to just slow down, tap on their brakes when they're coming down that hill and there's going to be people turning right in front of them.
Yeah, that is a because I use it. It's a big cut through.
I used to use it as a cut through too
Yeah.
before I lived on it.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. I referenced it earlier in the presentation that the Federal Highway Manual doesn't recommend speed humps in areas of an intersection or an incline, or
Yeah.
so that wouldn't even be an appropriate
Yeah.
spot for one. But a place like Hunter where you have a straightaway, could
Maybe we can get
possibly-
that speed sign for a little while
So
just to
that
get
you're-
people to slow down.
I know. Well, again, the police department is doing
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
with us. They are putting that up there. I mean, they receive the same calls we receive, and they go out and put the signs up to try to make people aware. And aware is good, but that's also a sign that I think they're trying to order a new one that does a little more documentation behind it. But that's one of the big
Next year.
components to that. I think they presented that they want one that can actually do some of this logging of what percentile. But I would tell you that they did it on Sherwood where we put those 2 new stop signs, and regardless of being a cut through, there weren't many cars that went over 30 miles an hour in that thoroughfare. But again, it's a neighborhood street that happens to be a big cut through. So, it's perception versus the reality of how fast those
I
cars.
mean, I am seeing other municipalities work toward implementing the 25 mile per hour village wide speed limit. So I'm assuming they're going to be doing traffic studies and everybody has to go through the same process if they want to
Mhm.
do that.
Yeah.
I think Croton's moving toward it. I just read somebody else. But it's a whole thing, right? You can't just go 25.
Yeah.
No, and it's an expense.
But
that was years before.
I don't know when the state mandated that. I believe it was in advance of that. But I don't know for sure. I do know what you
It
need to
doesn't
do
matter
now.
now, we have to do it. Okay,
In reference to Sherwood, like I say, 30 miles an hour on that street is fast.
Yeah.
When you do drive on it 30 miles an hour, you're like, wow, I'm going kind of quick. So and I think seeing the sign slowed a lot of people down. So you get your couple that are going over, but most people see it and go, they don't know if they're getting a ticket or not. Most people don't know what that sign's capable of.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's just 30 miles an hour is fast on that street.
Deputy Mayor, comments, questions?
Thank you, Paul. So I would say that for me, the primary concern is thinking about how to improve safety. And when we were having this conversation in detail, the last time we were having it was during the comprehensive plan. And if you look at chapter 6 of our comprehensive plan, there's a section on vehicle crash incidents at high occurrence intersections. Now, these are intersections, not streets, but it gives you a sense of where the accidents are happening. And some of the work that's been happening with the road diet really helps, I think, to address some of the highest places of crashes, both pedestrian and bicycles with vehicles. Now, what about the role that speed humps can play in uh, reducing accidents? I think that it's less about accidents because there actually isn't a ton of evidence that even the kinds of roads that Trustee Fritchie named as being ones where people move quickly, which I agree that do, they don't actually, according to the data that I've seen, produce disproportionately larger amount of accidents compared to similar streets. But when you're looking at it from a quality of life perspective, it is tough when you're walking around, especially pushing a carriage or you have older people or whatever, and cars are zipping by. And I don't know if Ossining has worse drivers than the average community, average drivers or better drivers. My feeling is kind of driving around, I see a lot of wackiness. Well, I see a lot of people doing a lot of wacky things. And so I'm always thinking about how can we help this situation so that everyone can be safe. The role that humps can play in the quality of life for streets that have become cut throughs. They're little streets meant for walking around and living on, but have become these thoroughfares. I think is where we most frequently would hear a potential improvement, and where I would probably be most in favor of looking at speed humps and all of the negatives that you named. The bigger one for me, though, would be where they would go, because my sense is that it's folks that are able to advocate for their particular community, at their street, their enclave. They're the ones that are going to be getting the speed humps. But I don't know in other streets that people may be also feeling the same way, but they aren't advocating it, so they don't know. So my big question would be, what problem is the speed hump attempting to solve? And if it is addressing streets that have become cut throughs, and that we now know that that's the case, so and slowing vehicles down in these cut throughs, I would be in favor of taking a look at what those streets are, putting in speed humps in the most frequently used streets. And I've seen how around this, I've seen in 3 different places around the village, there may be more. There are those new signs that show your speed, and then the lights, the blue and red lights, and people slow down. I have seen people slow down as a result of those things. So I think that these things work. Uh, these different interventions work to slow people's speed. The place where I will agree with Trustee Quesada is I'm not. I feel like when I drive around and I drive around communities that have speed humps, it doesn't feel like such a big deal. It feels normal. Where my parents live, they live in a over 55 community in Florida. That there's speed humps all over. They're like every 3 feet, there's a speed hump. It's like everywhere, and you know, it's annoying, but it's fine. They're not speed bumps, they're speed humps, and like it's fine. But that's because of this particular demographic. And so that's where for a quality of life for now these people who live in streets whose streets have become cut throughs, mine being one of them, by the way. That was one of the first things that got me and my wife involved in trying to figure out, like, what can we do about it? Why are there so many cars driving through our street? Oh, because it's a cut through, whatever. So that's the perspective that I bring. If we don't figure out what it is that these speed humps are attempting to do, then what are we really talking about? Nothing, I guess, just the idea of speed humps in general. But if we are going to actually talking about a problem to solve, I would put as a problem on the list, how can we address either streets that have become cut throughs or places that the data shows there are more crashes than anywhere else in the village, and we need to do something to reduce the number of crashes in those high occurrence areas. Try to figure out a question from all that, Paul. I don't think there is one, but that's my reaction to all that.
Yeah. So, oh, did you want to say something?
Well, I wanted to make reference again to the high cut through, high volume streets are not a street where they recommend putting the speed humps because of the traffic concern, the traffic issue that you would cause with the speed hump. And then the speed hump.
Right. It's ironic.
Right.
Yes.
And if it does become effective, you're diverting that traffic to another street.
Because people tend to hit their brakes. It's not a stop sign. You don't see it from a distance, and you're right behind them if you're in a high trafficked area. So it's ironic, actually, given the problem we're trying to solve is exactly a problem that may be created. So I don't want to repeat what others have said. I think this requires some more thinking. But I do have to tell you that the only place I've seen humps are in the city. They're usually on side streets. I mean, everything in Manhattan's a cut through, right? They're all not. They have on which street? Oh, you know what? I just don't go that way. I'm stay on Route 9. No, understood. I just don't happen to go on that, so I didn't realize. So, okay, that's fine. But the only ones I've seen and driven over happen to be Manhattan. They're on a side street. They're flat streets. One could argue that every street in Manhattan is a cut through, right? It's like everybody's trying to figure out the best way, and they're always near schools. That's the only place I've seen is effectively because they're in the middle of the street. They're not, by the stop sign. Because I guess the concern is near a school, kids are running around. And I guess it's effective, but I do hit the brakes because I don't live there. I don't remember that it's there. I don't even know if there's a sign there, but I do hit because I don't want to. I have one of my cars very low to the ground. I'm going to take my exhaust system off. So I guess I feel I have like mixed feelings about them. I mean, other people seem to have strong feelings one way or the other. I do like the idea of a test, of a pilot. I wish there was a way to do temporary ones. I know the parking lots do have the temporary, then in the winter they move them, but those aren't humps. Those are bumps. They're temporary humps. I've not seen either. So.
Yeah, I believe they make they're rubberized and something that you can install.
And I would think that in the winter they could be removed because with the plowing and all that. I actually would propose that coming up with one or two. Otherwise, Paul, I think we will be having this conversation. We will end up having an opinion conversation based on our experiences and whatever we do versus, you're going to read us the negatives. Yonkers is you could do it if you let people say, it's their street. It's not their street, actually. Our position is that the public roads belong to the public, not to the people who live this, their property. It's one thing, and in front of the street doesn't belong to the owners who own buildings, many of whom, by the way, don't even live in some of these houses. So I feel we're going to get into something that makes me uncomfortable personally, but I do think that the idea of trying one or two, and if there is a temporary solution, because then at least we could test it. We could actually see, does it really do a lot of damage? Because until we do that, it's a theoretical conversation of pros and cons. And we'll be spending a lot of time discussing pros and cons. But they do have to fit all your criteria. And the problem I'm having is cut-throughs that we're trying to solve for is exactly what apparently the engineer says, exactly where you're not supposed to. That's not where you're recommending one of the trials. So at least we have one where we could try, see how that plays out, if it solves anything. Because if it doesn't solve anything, I would not propose putting more of them in. Our biggest problem is actually the hills, to be honest, and the cut-throughs parallel to Route 9. And frankly, I think I would put cameras on all these things so we can catch people. If you don't catch a driver, you catch a license, because White Plains is increasing the number of cameras they're putting on lights and stop signs. They have to put a sign up, but I'll tell you something. Get one ticket to the car, not the driver, because they can't prove who was driving it. You don't do it again. It's really great for the regular ongoing users of that particular, not some tourist or somebody drives through White Plains, but actually people who use it regularly, especially like on Bloomingdale Road where they've put a bunch of them. Very effective, because people who use that road every day are like, okay, I can't cross the yellow turns red very quickly, and I can't speed through here because I'm going to get a ticket. And
I grew up in White Plains, and Bloomingdale Road is where
that's a big
I
one.
pulled over for the first time in my life.
Yeah, and they've always had a cop standing there, so they've done that. But again, how many tickets do you want to take and pay? Right, the fewer the better. I think an idea of like testing one based on a suggestion made, understanding that there are limitations to it, and something that may be temporary, so we could try it out, might be a nice solution. Then we can come back to it and say, okay, it works, it doesn't work, and try it out. Might be a solution. Otherwise, I think we're having a lot of theoretical conversations.
Agreed.
That might be something to look at.
Agreed, if I may.
No, please.
To reference Trustee Casada's comments on my very quick put together presentation, admittedly, it may have been a little biased to discourage, because that's just my personal preference. But again, I will take the direction of the board, and if I can make maybe some recommended marching orders, I think a litmus test somewhere could be productive. However, I don't know if it's necessarily should be Hunter or down by the waterfront. I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with the police, because they might have a better handle on, where their true problem areas are with speed control. And we've been working with them for some of the other sign placements. So I could sit with them and then report back to the manager about maybe a recommended test somewhere, whether, it'd be temporary measures at first. I would explore what's available for that.
It'll be
And then
great.
maybe we can build on that.
Yeah, I don't see how we would have a problem with that, because honestly, when I moved here, the downtown was there weren't that many residentials. There were a bunch of vacant lots. The traffic patterns have changed. So, we might all have different opinions, and having conversations about opinions becomes really hard to work with. So yeah, and it's okay if you're negative about stuff. You're a professional. You have a right to your opinion. We ask for your opinion. Take your opinion seriously. But I do think that come up with something here that I think would benefit the community. I think you agree with that. So let us know what the temporary, speak to the police, recommend a trial with the signs, the whole thing. Let's see what happens. And then we can make some, maybe, not a study by consultants, but by us and staff to see where we want to go.
You'll need
a resolution to do that.
No, Mayor,
Oh.
you'll need a study, because otherwise don't do a qualified study and there is an accident, lose what's called qualified immunity for the municipality. Making a road type change, have to be able to show on some design or some plan. And so in other words, the board can't simply say, well, that sounds like it's a good idea to do it on that street. That's why in all the municipalities that have legislation or speed humps, they require, putting aside the issue of the percentages. And by the way, almost every municipality I've looked at requires people on the street to do that. But what they require is they say, got to have a street where you've got to at least have 100 times where the cars go by. It's got to be a certain speed, got to be a certain size of the street. Well, they have it written into their statutes, because that's part of the study that has been done. So the board has to do that in order that if there was a litigation based upon somebody getting hurt, you could then say, well, we did this study, we had all this done, and we relied upon this. Don't have that face liability.
That is actually part of the Yonkers program. In addition, after the consensus of the neighborhood backs the program, then the Yonkers Traffic Division does implement the study, where they go in and they implement the traffic counts. They do an assessment of the road to see if it has the appropriate straightaway, the appropriate topography, the appropriate lane width, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then they do the actual design itself by a traffic engineer. Then they put the speed hump in.
Okay, so my other question is, I would assume you mean even if it's a temporary scenario, because I would argue that putting the temporary piece is actually could be considered part of a study.
Let me just say this, Mayor, of all the ones I've looked at, none of them deal with temporary. These are all they've decided to put in, with the exception of the one town that explicitly
Doesn't want them, because clearly they had many requests, so they had to put a policy in place to stop that.
Well, they actually put in, one of the reasons was that, one, with regard to emergency vehicles, but also because frankly, there are a number of cases that if cars get damaged as a result or there's personal injury, cases where the state has been held responsible with regard to speed humps.
Okay.
So that
All right, so that would be a requirement in order to cover ourselves. Okay. But let's move forward, and we could always say no.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That concludes tonight's program.
Tonight's
motion-
program, like at a Broadway show.
we have a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters of litigation.
Second.
Okay,
All those in favor?
aye.
Thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, 9:29 it looks like. Thank you for joining us, a productive meeting, and we will see you again on Wednesday. Good night.